the compared to what question can really teach us a lot. And it can help us value things, because if we understand that most things are valued by comparison to something else, we can really make better decisions, because it will tell us if something is cheap or it's expensive. And if we're just comparing it to the dollar, we don't always know if it's cheap or expensive. And you know this very well because you understand inflation, right? So the dollar is a moving target, right? So that could never answer the question, is it cheap or expensive?
This is Better Wealth with Caleb Guilliams. Jason Hartman, welcome to the BetterWealth Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Caleb. It's great to be here.
I was just saying as you logged in, number one, it's an honor to have you on here. You are so articulate. I think you can scare the living daylights out of my audience because the issues are real, and I want to dive into that. But the cool thing about you is you have solutions. You have solutions, and I just criticize a lot of people out there that are saying doomsday, but have nothing to pivot. So this is going to be a really powerful conversation. I know you're going to share your screen, so those of you that are watching on YouTube are going to benefit greatly from this. But first of all, you're known as a real estate guy. You have a ton going on. I would love to hear your story in a nutshell, like your why, and then let's dive in. And I'm ready to take notes. I got my pen and paper out.
Okay, sure. So, I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I grew up poor. I didn't like being poor very much. By about ninth grade, I realized all the best looking girls were hanging out with the rich kids. And, I wanted to have cool stuff, cool clothes, go on cool trips and stuff, and never got to do that really much when I was a kid. And so I started in real estate pretty early. My first year of college, I was 19 when I got my real estate license. And I just wanted to learn more about investing. And I thought the path to do that, not knowing anything at all, was to just start selling real estate as a broker. And so I did that. And 6 months into my career, I bought my first rental property from one of my own clients. I had sold him the property, and then he decided it wasn't his favorite property and asked me to take the listing for him. And I said, "Hey, I don't want to list it for you as your agent. I want to buy it from you." And so I bought my first rental property then. And I kind of had a bad experience. I had to evict my very first tenant ever, but I actually did make money on the deal, even though the rent collection part didn't go well. I did end up selling the property, made money, and I became addicted at that point, and purchased a lot more properties over my career. And I just think income property is really the most historically proven asset class in the world. Everything and everybody is so under attack nowadays, but there are defenses that we can use. And, one of them is your strategy. Another one is my strategy. And I'm sure there are others out there, but, yeah.
When it comes to inflation, I just watched a video that you did that was super well articulated around inflation, the problems that we have. But then I loved how you positioned it, because you're like, it's a problem, so let's actually use it in our favor. Because if you don't know the rules of the game, it will crush you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, like you said at the beginning, there's no shortage of doom and gloomers out there, and they're not all wrong, but they are kind of largely wrong in one way, the doom and gloomers. What they tend to not realize, or not say at least, number one, we have to understand the old saying in the newspaper business, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? Sensationalism and bad news gets attention. So a lot of the doom and gloomers, the clickbait, it's just incessant, right? It's all over the place. And they're not all wrong. But what they kind of don't realize is that all of these problems in the economy and all of this, the economy is built on a house of cards. And when people talk about that, they like to criticize the US, but every other economy is the same, pretty much. I mean, every currency on earth is a fiat currency, meaning it's not backed by gold or any precious metal. It's just backed by government decree. And the US, out of any country, is best positioned. So The other thing they kind of don't realize is that, or they don't say, is that it's truly amazing how long they can kick the can down the road,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Nothing, I mean, it seems like if you're just looking at the math, oh my God, look at all this money printing, the world's going to end, the Fed is buying all these assets. But so what? Who says they can't do that for 100 more years? Right? Like
Because
nobody ever has that, yeah.
Yeah, you're looking at every other country, and you look at Japan and all these other countries, and it's like, hey, we're actually best positioned. Is that kind of your philosophy? It's like, listen,
Absolutely.
yeah.
We are the prettiest girl at the ugly dance. Okay.
I like
so,
that.
it's the US is in a far superior position to like any other country, better than China, better than anything. Okay. We have the reserve currency of the world. People say that's going to change. I don't think it is going to change anytime soon. Someday it will, I'm sure, but it may be long after we're gone. So yeah, at the end of the day, the U.S. has the most powerful brand in the world. No matter what anybody says, they still want to come to America. I saw the horrific stories of our just completely irresponsible withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the Afghans clinging to our transport airplanes taking off and falling off of them after the plane takes off to their death. I mean, it's just awful. So, how can you say America's so bad, right? That's just a complete falsehood, So, sorry, Peter Schiff, you're just wrong over and over again. I mean,
and by the way, I agree with you. I've had the opportunity to travel, and it's like being an American. It's kind of like you're the cool kid. Everyone wants to take pictures with you, and it's like surreal. I remember being in India one time, and someone's dream was to be in Los Angeles. Like they grow up wanting to just travel to the United States of America, and it's like, man, we take all this stuff for granted. Before we delve into real estate, because I know you can articulate this well, and you have a presentation that I'm excited to dive into. What do you think the big issues are? Like, why are we broke? Why are we miserable? Why are we not living intentional? As it relates, we're the richest country in the world, and yet it's sometimes you walk outside and you go like, what are we doing?
Well, I mean, that's of course a totally loaded question. And when you say we, are you talking about sort of the population that's sort of the overentitled population, or the slackers who aren't doing anything with their life? Well, I mean, it's a whole complex variety of problems, of course, but I would say you could sum a lot of it up in luxury is the lull to apathy, right? When people have their basic needs met, and when they're comfortable, they just don't try very hard. That's just the way the human animal is. It's the psychology of the human being. And some people have, we were talking a little bit about business before. You're obviously a very ambitious young guy. And I've been very ambitious all my life. And some people are able to just be continually motivated, even though they're comfortable, right? I mean, there are billionaires who work hard every day, and you could argue that maybe that's a sickness, or maybe it's great and character. It's good character. I don't know, but certainly the general population has been hypnotized with what they used to call bread and circuses, where and that's what they did in ancient Rome to appease the population, right? They gave them the basic food and the entertainment so that they would become complacent. And I mean, Aldous Huxley's book Brave New World, and many movie versions of it, outlines that pretty well. So
when it comes to people that have a good head on their shoulders, what are maybe the biggest mistakes people are making, maybe like myself, who want to become wealthy? Our audience is filled with people that want to live intentional lives. They're saving money, they're investing it, and they're listening to this for a reason, because they want to learn a better way. What's kind of the big mistakes that people are making that have money and are willing to work, but maybe are working or climbing up the wrong tree, as Stephen Covey would say?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of the late Stephen Covey. He was awesome. I got to meet him in Russia once, actually. We were on a cruise ship in Russia, so very, very great author. He wrote a lot of good stuff. I mean, there are many things, right? But I would say one thing is relying on other people to do the work for you, trusting other people, outsourcing your investments, just blindly handing over your money to some guy wearing a nice suit who really hasn't achieved what you want to achieve. They're just losing control of one's money. You want to, as much as possible, and I know we all can't do this all the time, but try to be a direct investor whenever possible, where when you put your money into something, you control that thing versus just relinquishing control to somebody else. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is people need to protect their assets in advance. Obviously, we live in a very litigious world. A lot of stuff can happen, and one thing that I've definitely learned is the more well-known you become, and not to say that I'm that big a deal. I mean, in my little world, I'm well-known, right? But outside of it, I'm not Brad Pitt, okay? But like you become a target. People take pot shots at you, and you really got to set things up to protect yourself, protect your wealth, your speech, use entities, and have that, do that kind of stuff. You got to do that stuff in advance. Okay. It's stuff that cannot be done after the fact. Okay. It has to be done in advance.
That's something I even noticed, that you have a private family or foundation. I'm not sure if it's a private family foundation, and it's something that this year was something that I took time and money to set that up for myself and my family, mainly because I want to start thinking that way, but I want to get it established before it's like, oh, I should have had this 2 years ago kind of deal.
Right. And the foundation isn't really like an asset protection thing or an asset defense thing. That I set up when I sold my last company 16 years ago. I just wanted to do something philanthropic. Of course, you put money into the foundation, you can deduct it on your taxes, but it's not like that. It's not like any great strategy. I mean, there are better things you can do than that. But someday if I ever do retire, I do want to get more involved in philanthropy. And so I thought, like you set that up now and get the wheels in motion. So
let's talk about real estate. And
sure.
I mean, I hear this a lot. The market's hot. The housing prices might be too high, which I know you have probably some powerful opinions about that.
Sure.
So in doing my research and just some of the things that you teach, a lot of the people in my industry will talk about how taxes have to go up. And I think you have an interesting perspective on that, or how the market's going to crash and just something has to change. And so as we talk about real estate, why is this asset class like the number one asset class as it relates to investing in, as it relates to building wealth and making sure that we can have sustainable wealth? And I want to set the stage because while we're recording this, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I'm hearing from multiple people, I just feel like it can't continue to go up, and we're just going to wait until the market crashes to buy or get involved. And I know that you have some interesting things to say about that.
Right. Yes, definitely. And, the first thing I'd say about that is the reason income property is so desired and everybody talks about it is because it has very special characteristics. It's a multi-dimensional asset class, whereas many asset classes are one-dimensional, maybe two-dimensional. So just a couple examples there. If you buy precious metals or cryptocurrencies or non-dividend paying stocks, those are one-dimensional. The whole strategy is buy low, sell high. That's it. That's the whole game, right? And then they might be two-dimensional if it's a dividend-paying stock, for example. Buy low, sell high, get dividends in between, right? But income property is multidimensional. In fact, it has a lot of dimensions to it. But just to mention a couple of them, it's buy low, sell high, get cash flow or dividends, if you will, huge tax benefits. It's the most tax-favored asset class in America. The ability to take advantage of an imperfect market. So one of the things that happens in economics is in any marketplace that is very perfect, and what I'll tell you what I mean by that in a moment, the opportunity dissipates. So for example, take the stock market, right? If you own, say, shares of Microsoft, and they're trading at $100. I have no idea what Microsoft's trading for it now, but say it's $100, right? That's the share price. And the reason you know that share price is because you look at the ticker, you look at the exchange, and that's the price. You can't call your stockbroker and say, hey, look, I've got this Microsoft stock. I know it's trading at $100. I really want to sell it at $120 per share. And look, I was hoping you could do a little creative marketing and maybe, put a little coat of paint on it and improve the stock. You can't do that. Real estate is a very imperfect market. So the more knowledgeable person, the person who moves more quickly, is rewarded in real estate. Whereas, I guess you could say the more knowledgeable person or the faster mover in stocks, sure, but there are so many knowledgeable people in that world that it's a very perfect market. It's a very sophisticated market. And if anybody who's a stock market investor thinks they're going to beat the high frequency traders, they literally are insane. There's no possible way. Okay. And watch Michael Lewis's interview on 60 Minutes a few years ago where he talked about that. And read the book Flash Boys. It's just not going to happen. So, in real estate, it's largely a mom and pop business. It's becoming more institutionalized for sure, but the institutional players in that world, BlackRock, Blackstone, Invitation Homes, you've heard all the names. They're a tiny percentage of the market. Now, granted, they are growing and getting bigger, but as we speak today, it's like a bucket of water in the ocean. It's just nothing so far. Okay. So very imperfect market leads to more opportunity.
Right. It's the stock market's very efficient, and you could say real estate there's a lot of opportunity to grow, and so it rewards the person that's willing to take action and has specialized knowledge. You say we like to call the real estate market and combine it all into one.
I know, yeah.
It's kind of hilarious if you think about that, because when people say real estate, like, what are we talking about? I believe you said there's like 400 plus sections or categories that we could put in real estate. What kind of real estate should we be looking into?
Yeah, and for those who are looking at this on video, I know not everybody is. I'll just share my screen here, and there are about 400 MSAs, or metropolitan statistical areas, but even those are too large to call a real estate market. There are over 3,100 counties in the country, and there are way more cities than that. I don't even know how many cities there are. And even within a city, that's bigger than a market, because a market is really a neighborhood. Okay. So it's very difficult to talk about the real estate market or the housing market in a country as large and diverse as the United States. It's just, you just can't do it. But you can, for efficiency's sake, divide things into three types of markets. There are linear markets, and these are sort of the slow and steady markets, and we think they're the most profitable markets. If anyone were to look at my website, jasonhartman.com, and they click on the properties page, they would see properties in linear markets, okay? Because those are the markets we like best. They have the best yield, the best cash flow, and over time, they tend to actually appreciate the best. But they don't get much attention, Caleb. The markets that get all the attention are number two, the cyclical markets. And these are the markets that are, if you're looking at a chart or a graph, it's like a roller coaster, ups and downs. And these are trophy markets. So in the US, there are places like where I live, South Florida, okay, Miami up to Palm Beach, where I am, the West Coast of the United States, or the expensive Northeastern markets, New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, et cetera, right? So those are the two major types, and then in between the two are hybrid markets. And examples of hybrid markets would be places like Denver, Austin, Atlanta, it's kind of debatable on some of those because it fluctuates a bit. Phoenix, maybe, but those are the examples around the world. The cyclical markets would be places like London, Paris, Dubai, Hong Kong. Okay, the rest of the world is pretty much a linear market. Most real estate markets are linear. The vast majority of planet Earth is linear. Okay, so those are the three major types, and we like linear markets the best.
So you would stay away from buying real estate in like New York or California or like hot markets, but you're pretty much pick a place on the map of the United States, you can make it profitable.
Well, don't just pick a place on the map. That would be a dart.
Throw a dart at the map.
No darts. But yeah, I would say by and large, linear markets are the best markets in which to invest. But still, there are a lot of choices in linear markets, right? So, yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about the Hartman Comparison Index. I think this is something that it can just provide a lot of value to my audience, and so. Why don't you explain what that is? And
sure, absolutely. So, when people try to evaluate the value of anything in the world, they typically evaluate the value of it in whatever currency they use. So we use the dollar. Some people use the euro, the peso, the yen, the Brazilian real, whatever, right? Whatever currency they use is how they try to think of the value of something. But that is a huge mistake, okay? And the reason it's a huge mistake is because the value of their own currency is constantly fluctuating. There's a whole group of people, some of them extremely wealthy, who just trade currencies all day. That's all they do. They don't even buy stock or bonds or mutual funds or real estate. They just trade currencies. They trade the value of the euro versus the dollar or the yen, right? And so the currency is fluctuating. So people need to really figure out what measuring stick they're using, not rely on only one measuring stick, use several measuring sticks to establish maybe a mean or an average, which will give them a much more accurate assessment of value. So my listeners, Caleb, constantly they seem to like when I say this saying. It's really a question. And the question is, compared to what? Compared to what? And so my listeners have even dubbed this the Jason Hartman question. Now, obviously, I did not invent the question. I'd love to take credit for it if I did. But the compared to what question can really teach us a lot. And it can help us value things. Because if we understand that most things are valued by comparison to something else, we can really make better decisions because it will tell us if something is cheap or it's expensive. And if we're just comparing it to the dollar, we don't always know if it's cheap or expensive. And you know this very well because you understand inflation, right? So the dollar is a moving target, right? So that could never answer the question, is it cheap or expensive? So right now, people look at the price of real estate and they look at the median house price, about $350,000 what? Dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But that's only dollars, right? It's only one thing. How much will those dollars buy us? That's changing. So how about if we just go right to the source? And my index, the Hartman Comparison Index, or the HCI, basically compares the price of real estate to over 40 other things. And it tells us whether or not we are in a bubble, which is the question people are constantly asking. Are we in a bubble? Many people think we are in a bubble. And so I don't know. Let's explore it together, okay?
I love this, by the way. Thank you for doing this, because this gets me fired up, because again, it's so true. Everyone's comparing to the dollar, and the dollar is getting less and less valuable, and yet we think that's the best measuring stick.
Yeah, they're making a huge mistake by only using the dollar as their measuring stick. It's just it's a huge error in judgment. So what I want to do is help people use other things that are typically things that are sought after worldwide and not measured in any currency. Okay, they're measured in every currency because everybody uses these things and everybody wants them. Okay, so let's first, to answer the question, when will the bubble pop, understand, and I'm just going to pass a couple things here. There's a couple other indexes I compare it to, but let's go right into it. So gold, right? Caleb, I mean, gold has been considered money for 5,000 years. The first gold coins were fashioned about 2,600 years ago. And I'm not a gold bug. I don't even think gold is a very good investment. Okay. I think it's okay to own some. I do, but I wouldn't put a ton of money into it. But it's a measuring stick, right? Mm-hmm. And it's been considered a store of value for 5 millennia. So if we look at gold and we go to 1970, where the median house price was just about $23,000 and gold was $35 an ounce, it would cost 646 ounces of gold to buy the median house. And if we go to, say, 1990, let's just take another one on the chart here. The median house price was 122, if you're rounding, 122,000. Gold was 415 an ounce. So it was 293 ounces of gold to buy a house in 1990.
That's fascinating.
Okay, yeah. So in 20 years from 1970 to 1990, priced in gold, houses actually got cheaper. They got about better than half price. Yet everybody in 1990, I guarantee you, was saying, oh my God, houses used to be so cheap 20 years ago. Why are they so expensive now? They're $122,000 when they used to only be $23,000.
Right.
You see the error here, right?
100%. And someone once explained housing prices has more to do with interest rates than anything else. If you look at 1970, what was the average mortich?
Yeah,
interest rate?
About 7.3%. To answer your question,
it would be interesting to look at the payments, because I bet the payments haven't fluctuated nearly as much as the price. Yeah. And so interest rates have manipulated that quite bigly.
You are absolutely right. And we do that in part 2 of the index, and we can jump to that and do it today if you want. Okay.
I'm here to learn, but this is fascinating.
Yeah. So let's just finish up on the gold thing. So as of June of this year, the median house price was almost $350,000. And the gold price was just under $1,800. So it would be 194 ounces of gold to buy the median price house, right? So in 51 years, the house is less than 1/3 of what it used to cost. And everybody thinks it's more expensive.
Wow.
It's cheaper. And you know what? If you don't believe me, I want your listeners and viewers, Caleb, they should do what I'm constantly recommending on my podcast and my YouTube channel. They must watch old movies and old TV shows and listen to old music and read old books. And I don't mean even that old. Just watch a movie from the early 1970s. There are many classic movies, hit movies from the early 1970s. And you can look around and see how people lived. You get a decent representation of what a rich person was, depending on the movie you're watching, what a middle-class person, what a poor person, what their life was like, right? You know, it's a movie, it's not perfect, but it's close enough. If you watch shows like The Brady Bunch, you know, or whatever, on Nick at Night, you know, you get a sense of what life was like then, right? And you see that people in a lot of ways are much richer today. And here you can see their standard of living in terms of the house they can buy is much cheaper priced in gold if they save their money in gold. So priced in gold, it's cheap.
Is right? That because of innovation?
There's not much innovation in real estate. It's a primitive industry. So, it's funny. I was interviewing a guest on my Creating Wealth podcast maybe a year ago, and he had a really good line. We were grousing about how there's just almost no innovation in building, right? It's a really primitive business. It's pretty much been done mostly the same way it's been done for 100 years now. And he said, yeah, Jason, the biggest innovation in construction is the nail gun, right? It's not exactly high tech. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's not because of that. It's just because truly in many ways, the standard of living has gotten a lot better. But not if you saved your money in dollars.
Yeah.
Because going back to this chart, and the problem is we're not going to have enough time to do much, so I don't want to harp on gold too long. But that's Bitcoin. Sorry. So in gold, the question is, right? 2010, To buy a house priced in gold, it was 208 ounces. Today, it's 194. So it's not much cheaper, but it's a little cheaper than it was in 2010. So the question is, if you were saving up to buy a house for the last 10, 11 years, if you saved it in dollars, you would be paying, what is this? $150,000 more about.
Yep.
But if you saved it in gold, you would be paying about 15 ounces less.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do you want to save your money in?
Right.
Dollars or gold, right? That's the question. Where do you want to store the money? Now, you'd be much better storing it in a bunch of income properties, but this is a good example because it's really quantifiable.
Yep.
Okay. So let's move on. Let's skip Bitcoin. Houses are way cheaper in Bitcoin than they were when Bitcoin started. That's easy. Oil's a good one though, Caleb.
Yep.
You want to do oil?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. So 1970, median house price, 23,000. Oil is $3 a barrel. A barrel is about 55 gallons. So for a whole barrel of oil, it's only $3. Today, a barrel of oil is about $75. So in 1970, 51 years ago, it would cost you many oil trucks to buy a house. If you wanted to trade the seller of the house, you would have to pull up in front of that house with 6,746 barrels of oil. That's a lot of oil. Today, you could pull up in front of that house with like a third less, almost a third less, 4,622 barrels of oil to buy a house today. So priced in oil, houses are cheaper. Okay. Now, in orange juice, houses are more expensive if you want to price it in orange juice. Okay. So 1970 orange juice, it was 51,000 pounds of orange juice to buy a house. Today it's 280,000 pounds. So priced in orange juice, housing's gotten a lot more expensive. Okay. Rice, it's gotten cheaper. Okay. In the S&P, the Standard & Poor's 500 index, which is largely considered the biggest gauge of the economy and what it's doing, right? 72% of consumer spending's in the S&P. So priced in the S&P index is a good one. 1970, the house was about 23,000. Shares of the S&P were $93. 243 shares of the S&P to buy the median price house. Today, median price house, 350 grand almost. The S&P's at 4,352 per share. Only 80 shares of the S&P to buy a house today.
Fascinating.
So priced in the S&P 500 index, are houses cheap or expensive?
Cheaper,
a lot cheaper, right? And I can give you these examples over and over. I can price them in people's median income. I can price, how many years of income does it take to buy a house? And here it's actually a little higher, okay? But today you usually have both people working. If they're a couple, in 1970, not so much. It was just the man working usually. There's just a lot of moving targets here, right? But overall, the index shows that housing is still fairly cheap, believe it or not. Okay.
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
Most people would think different. Okay. So we do it in the Forbes cost of living well index. There's just a whole bunch of stuff in the index, but we don't have time to go through it all. So questions, and I want to get to part 2 of the index because you brought that up earlier.
Yeah, I want to dive right into your presentation. I just want to say thank you because again, you're articulating things that are just people are not talking about, and it's eye-opening. And this is the first time I'm seeing some of this stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I just want to get people to think in a new way.
Yeah.
Okay? They just, it's very myopic to price things in only dollars. That just is not enough information, right? So when you go to the second phase of the index, it's not about the price of the house, it's about the payment on the house. So the vast majority of home buyers do not buy on the price. They don't care what the price is. The house could be $3 million. If the payment is $1,300 a month, sign me up. I'll take it. Okay. Like, it doesn't matter what the price is. That's just a number. What matters is how much is it per month. Okay. So if we price that in dollars and we adjust those dollars, that monthly payment for inflation, we're going to learn some things. But also, if we compare that monthly payment to other things, which is what the index does, okay? Let's take a look at some of this. So let's look at the inflation-adjusted payment first, okay? So in 1970, the median priced home would create a mortgage payment of $142 a month. Pretty cheap, right?
Yep.
Today, that median price house is a payment of $1,170 a month. But wait, there's more, as they say at 2:00 in the morning on that infomercial when you can't sleep. Okay. Today, when you adjust for the official inflation numbers, which are highly manipulated and understated, of course, you know that. Okay.
What are those numbers? Are we talking 3%?
Well, it varies, but it's about, for 30 years from 1970 to about 2000, it was about 5.1% on average. And I don't know what it is for the full 51 years offhand. Okay. But today, that payment is only $169 adjusted for inflation. And understand this, the inflation index, the CPI, the consumer price index, the most widely used measure of inflation, is massively understated. So what this means is that if you calculated the real rate of inflation, this $169 would be dramatically lower than that. And I don't know what it would be. It depends what calculation you use. I like an index called the Chapwood Index, which I think is a really good index because all they do, it's really simple. It's not manipulated. They take 500 items that people buy a lot, and they average the cost of them in a bunch of different cities. And right now, the Chapwood Index would tell you that the inflation rate in pretty much any major city is about 13%, I think. Okay, so that would make this a payment maybe $70. The house is actually cheaper just on the payment alone. Okay, so what if we priced the payment in ounces of gold or barrels of oil or pounds of orange juice, right? Remember, the interest rate is less than half of what it was 51 years ago on a mortgage, right? So it's gotten a lot cheaper. If you had a stock of gold in, under your bed in your house, right? And you took out a little bit of that gold to pay your mortgage every month. You went down, you converted the gold to dollars, and then you paid the mortgage. In 1970, you would have to convert 4.1 ounces of gold. In 1980, you would only have to convert 0.9 ounces of gold. 10 years later, it's 1/4 the amount, less than that even. But in 1990, it got a little more expensive, 2.1 ounces of gold. I'll just fast forward to today, it's only 0.7 ounces of gold. So the monthly mortgage payment priced in gold is the cheapest it's ever been in 51 years right now. Pretty amazing. Yet everybody thinks houses are too expensive, right?
Yep.
I don't know. How about oil? 1970, to pay your mortgage, you would have to take 42 barrels of oil, convert them to dollars, and then pay the mortgage. Yep. Today, you only have to take 16 barrels of oil, convert them to dollars, and pay the mortgage, right? Orange juice, priced in orange juice, it is more expensive. In 1970, 319 pounds of orange juice. Today, 944. So orange juice, not a good place to store your money. Okay?
Don't be buying those oranges.
Yeah, those orange futures, right, on the commodities market. That would be a bad deal. How about shares of the S&P? Now, remember, this is the payment, not the house. You're not paying cash for the house. You're financing it.
Yeah.
1.5 shares of the S&P to pay your mortgage in 1970. 5.3 in 1980. In 2010, 0.9, but today only 0.3. Priced in the S&P, paying your monthly mortgage is the cheapest it's been in 51 years.
Yeah.
Right? How about hours worked? How many hours does the average person need to work to pay their mortgage? In 1970, they had to work 41 hours. Today, they have to work 46, a little more, but not too much, because compared to what? Compared to 1990, they had to work 83 hours to pay the mortgage payment. So it's not bad. It's a little more expensive, but in 51 years, you only had to work 5 more hours to pay the mortgage. And the house today is quite a bit nicer than it was 51 years ago.
I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, there's a bunch of ways you can slice this. You can compare it to tuition. You can compare it to a whole host of things. That's what the Hartman Comparison Index does. And it would take a day to go through it all. Okay.
Jason, thank you. Thank you for putting the time in and sharing that. I just, my mind's going like a million miles an hour. I think of even like the mortgage, the 30-year mortgage is like, is like the greatest wealth building tool for us consumers.
Oh yeah.
Is there a better tool out there?
Not much. That's really good that you bring that up because most people consider the house to be the asset and the mortgage to be the liability. But really, if you look at it as though you're effectively shorting the US dollar when you get a mortgage, because you get to pay that debt back in cheaper dollars. And I have a trademark technique for this. I call it inflation-induced debt destruction, which I talked about on a video with your friend. With that, you pay the mortgage back in cheaper dollars, and that is effectively a short on the dollar. And I think everybody with a brain agrees that shorting the dollar is a pretty good investment right now. Okay.
Unless your name is Dave Ramsey.
But unless it's Dave Ramsey, Harry Dent, or, well, Peter Schiff would be shorting the dollar, but he thinks everything's doom and gloom. So
can I put a summary? I'm going to try to land the plane here. I'm going to try to do this justice.
Sure.
Real estate, because it appreciates, can create cash flow, has the best tax advantages. You can use leverage. You can short the dollar while getting the asset. It's those reasons and much more, but those reasons why real estate as an asset class is a no-brainer, and you should be looking to that before you look to gold and Bitcoin and putting your money in the market. Am I highlighting this well?
Yeah, I think so, because it's multidimensional and it's got all these creative things and it's an imperfect market and all the rest of the stuff we discussed. Yes. But we call it income property, but really a big part of that asset is the mortgage itself. Mm-hmm. It's just that you have to get the property to get that great mortgage. So it's part of the deal.
And that was kind of my part too, is then you look at inflation. And if I just summarize a lot of your thoughts, it's like, hey, inflation's this bad thing. We can all agree that inflation's not ideal, but instead of crying about it, like let's short the dollar, let's get on the and let's use it as our advantage, because there's entities that will say, we'll give you money and allow you to pay us back 29 years from now with the same dollars that are worth way less.
Right. Absolutely. You were absolutely right. Nailed it. Yeah.
So what's call to action? I know it's like, I want to learn more. My audience wants to learn more. What can we do?
One thing I can offer to your audience is I've got a little mini book available for free. It's totally free, no strings attached. It's just a PDF you get right away. And it's available at pandemicinvesting.com. People are kind of amazed that I was able to get that domain name. Pandemicinvesting.com. And it adapts a lot of the strategies I've been teaching for many years to the crazy world in which we live now. And that's available totally free at pandemicinvesting.com. That'll get you on our mailing list. So when we email updates on the Hartman Comparison Index, you'll get them. And I would just recommend getting that at pandemicinvesting.com. My main website is my name, jasonhartman.com. And then, of course, my podcast, The Creating Wealth Show, is available everywhere on all the podcast platforms. And I'm also on YouTube. Just look up Jason Hartman and you'll find all of my YouTube videos.
Were you able to get the pandemicinvesting.com? Like, was it $12 or did you pay a lot of money for it? It's remarkable. Way to go.
I didn't even buy it from anybody. I just bought it right from the domain registrar. Yeah.
I love it, man. The way I end all the shows is with something called the legacy question. And the legacy question goes like this. This was your last day on earth and you could not give any of your books, podcasts, anything that you teach to the people that you love the most, but you had one last conversation. What would that conversation look like and what would you focus on?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. And it is really tough for a lot of us to imagine our own demise, right? Unless we have a terminal disease or something, which hopefully nobody listening or watching does. And that is a really tough question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I couldn't answer that today. I have not given that thought, and that day will come for all of us. And it's a good question, even as a rhetorical question, just to think about. Maybe since we're talking finance and business, I'll sort of put it in that category. But maybe understand that work should not be considered necessarily work. It's a third of our lives or more, and it should be meaningful. It should be a mission, and it should be something that we would do for free. And if we find that thing, we're probably going to do so well at it that we won't be doing it for money anyway. So, since we're talking finance, I could at least share that. Okay.
I think it's very inspiring because you don't have to do this. You have, let's just say you don't have to work for money. I think
listen, there are some days when I wonder why I haven't retired. It's not all,
but
it's not all roses.
It's very clear that you're passionate about getting this out. And I asked you before we started the podcast, if you were 25, like again, knowing what you know now, what would you do?
Yeah. Yeah. And my answer to that one was I would have gone in heavier because I would have had back then more time to earn it back if I made a mistake. And I certainly made lots of mistakes along the way. But I think one of the bigger mistakes is being overly conservative. Now, just to understand, don't interpret that wrong. When I say being overly conservative, that doesn't mean I wouldn't be careful on deals that I would do. But I would do more deals.
Yeah.
Okay. I would buy more properties versus, like keeping a lot of money in the bank and then buying some properties and saying, oh, we got enough properties, right? The properties have just been such a gem and such a good asset class. And there's no reason to think that will change over the next 10 or 20 years. I mean, look, even if property prices go down, which they may, okay? I mean, they will at some point. There will certainly be a correction. Nobody just knows exactly when it will be, right? But if you're investing for yield and cash flow, that's the way you keep them for the long term. Who cares if they go down? If you're getting a yield that produces 20% every year, so what? Even if the value goes to half, I don't care. I'm just going to keep it and get my 20% every year.
And a lot of people out there that's saying there's a bubble and they're looking at the Fed. You're saying yes, compared to what? Hey, see it? Compared to absolutely. What? Look at everybody else is even in a worse position. So we as a country are going to keep printing money, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
There's no other levers at this point that they can pull.
Right. No, you're right. They every time they go, the elite hypocrites go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or, where the Fed meets every year, or Davos, Switzerland, to the World Economic Forum, or, the G7 countries meet in Germany or something, right? You see this on the news, right? They overcomplicate it. At the end of the day, they're just frickin' printing money. That's all they're actually doing. Okay. Yes, they can have meetings about it. They can fly their private jets, have, the best vodka and the best wine. But at the end of the day, they're just increasing the money supply. That's it. Right. That's really all it is. So here, I do want to make a prediction I've made before, but I think you'll like this. Look, regardless of what the real estate market does, one thing I think we know for sure is that ultimately interest rates have to go up. Mortgage rates have to get higher. I don't know exactly when, but they're going to go up. Okay. So all of the people that have this locked in 3-decade-long short on the dollar, when these mortgages, when they ask compared to what, and mortgages are back to 6, 7, 8, 10%, who knows, right? I mean, look, in the 70s, they were up at like 18, 20%, okay? But maybe they're back at 6 or 8 or 10%, okay? And that's not super high historically. They're going to think, wow, I have this mortgage locked in on these properties I own at 3%, and I've got 25 years left on that. They are not going to give those mortgages up. They are going to want to do whatever they can to keep those ultra cheap mortgages, which means they're not going to sell the properties. Yeah. So they would be more likely to, if they live in the property, to improve the property, to put an addition on the property, to remodel the kitchen or something like that. And if it's a rental property, they're just going to want to keep them because they can't repeat that cheap mortgage. That cheap mortgage becomes a commodity that's irreplaceable. It's like a diamond. It's rare.
It's an asset.
It's an asset.
Yep.
And so that is going to create an additional housing shortage when those people won't relinquish those houses because of those ultra cheap mortgages. And I don't think many people are thinking of that. In fact, I don't think anybody's thinking of that. I haven't heard it anywhere else. It's just my own theory. So I'm not sure there's going to be a big crash or a bunch of supply anytime soon. I mean,
with you. And also scarce. I mean, there's scarcity. There's not like you can, it's this beautiful thing. Just question, how can our interest rates go up when you look at our debt? Is that something that is problematic? Because,
well, I mean, think about what happens on the reverse side of it, right? The US government, to finance its drunken sailor spending, has to basically sell bonds, treasuries, and to get people to buy them, they have to offer a high yield on them. And the way to offer a high yield is you have to raise interest rates, right? So it's a trap. I mean, we are in a trap, right? They want the economy to keep going, so they keep printing money like drunken sailors or loosening the money supply through low interest rate policies. But at the same time, they need to get people, countries, mostly countries, to buy our sovereign debt, and they got to raise interest rates or they're not going to buy them. So it's a real catch-22. It's a mess.
Maybe next time you come on the show, you can explain to me negative interest rates, because I apparently do not get that.
Don't worry. You don't have to explain them. We already have them. Because in real terms, interest rates are negative today. If you borrow money at 3% and, half of that, if your tax bracket's 50% state and federal, so you're only paying 1.5%. If inflation is another 3%, you're paying negative 1.5.
There you go.
Today. We already have negative interest rates.
Go get your free money.
Yeah.
Jason,
absolutely.
Thank you. Guys, go to pandemicinvesting.com. Can't wait to dive into this. Jason, I appreciate your time, your expertise, and your passion.
Hey, my pleasure, Caleb. Happy investing. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth Podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.